Good evening, everyone. Happy Thursday, as always. We're just one day away from this all being over. Not talking about the apocalypse, we're just talking about Friday. But anyways, it makes you feel good to know that we're almost through this week. Also makes you feel good to know that you have tuned in to the fastest hour on the internet. We are Night Terrors Radio. I am joined tonight by Rob Pastilli. How you doing, Rob?
I'm wonderful. Great week so
Rob
far.
waves. Thanks for breaking down that fourth wall of radio, Rob. This is how we suck up all the dead air in the room. As always, the ever-present Mark Gray.
Hello. Survived another week, barely.
I am back, Ash Hamilton, from www.horror-fix.com. That is horror-fix.com. We have a fantastic show lined up. We have Dan Klaes. He's going to be talking about Hinsdale House, called Buffalo's Most Haunted House, called one of America's Most Haunted Houses. Multiple shows have been brought into Hinsdale House. Some fantastic evidence has been brought before the public. How are you doing tonight, Dan?
Wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing great. This is the night that I look forward to every week.
Is it before or after you see a cool movie?
Well, I did get to see, we were talking earlier, and I will not give away any spoilers, but I did get to see Venom 2 this evening. I just came from seeing that film. And you can take that any way you want to. Like, I just came back home from seeing that film, or I got extremely excited, and now I need to change my pants from seeing that film. Either or, this is subject to interpretation. That's what we do here on the show.
I think you just need to change your pants from drooling the cucumber all over yourself.
I did hit the pop filter, though. We did say that. There was something like a hair that's coming off of this. Whatever. Anyways, we're going to have a great night tonight. I can't wait to get into some of the meat of Hinsdale House. Can't wait to talk about how everybody's week is going. Hopefully it's going a little bit better than mine. I have a very, very busy week. I'll just go ahead and do my shameless self-promotion because why not? I mean, after all, this is our show, right? I should be able to do that. So, busy week. I will be beheaded. That's exactly what's happening. So this is why everything's coming to a head at the end of this week. As of tomorrow, I will be venturing out to Kentucky. I will be in Louisville, Kentucky. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I will be at the Fright Night Horror Weekend and Film Festival. I will be representing Night Terrors Radio. We have a fantastic Night Terrors Radio banner that will be there at the convention with us. And not to mention, my feature film that I wrote and directed was an official selection at this year's festival and will be playing in the B Room Saturday, 12 noon to 2 p.m. And I will be there all weekend with my booth talking about Night Terrors Radio, talking about our board game Slice and Dice, and also promoting our feature film, Holes in the Sky, the Sean Miller story. So if anybody is wanting to come out in the Kentucky area, come out and see us. I'll have a booth. I'll have a game. I'll be very vibrant and full of personality just for you. And I'll be there
And he
for
won't be
3
wearing
days.
pants.
That's why luckily I'm sitting down at a table. Just like this Zoom meeting. I can do whatever I want.
So you wrote it and you directed it.
Yeah.
And you were the cameraman.
I was also
And
the
the co-star.
cinematographer. Yeah. That's how
And
home
the
the
editor.
film is.
You did all this.
I edited it.
You did the stunts.
I did my own stunts. I did all of the post-production special effects. And I have to shout out to the people who were involved in the making of the film, because we're going up against films in the film festival market that are films that have upwards of $300,000-$400,000 in the micro budget, and even films that have in excess of $1 million for their budget. We are going up against those films, and we are being competitive and actually landing selections. So as of right now, we are an official selection at 8 film festivals.
That's awesome.
6 nationally, 2 internationally at this point. So we're very, very happy at what we've been able to accomplish on a shoestring budget through the kindness of strangers. And I know a couple of the films that even we're playing against in the next couple weeks, and these are big films. These are films that are already going to have a very large and wide distribution deal, and the fact that we are able to sort of sit in their company, we're very grateful. We're very, very happy for what we've accomplished so far.
And he's just a goofy accent away from being Tommy Wiseau.
It's close. It's very, very close. Yeah. I dry hump with absolutely no knowledge of where any hole is at. In case you've seen The Room, that's how I emulate Wiseau's acting style. Sometimes it's the belly button. Sometimes it looks like I'm trying to do an impromptu tracheotomy. I don't know where it's at. You know.
Oh, hi, Lisa. You're my future wife.
The man of the little boat. I don't even know where to dock. I don't know what I'm doing. So, without further ado, if you could, Dan, could you please?
I'm so sorry, Dan.
This is what you gotta follow. A night of my self-denigrating humor. So, if you can, give us an idea first of all of what your background is, so people who might not know you, who are listening or watching to the show, sort of where you're coming from, where you're speaking to us from tonight, and then let's get into the Hinsdale house.
Sure. I mean, I'm in my office in Amherst, New York, right now, working on editing in Nick Groff's new show, Death Walker, that's going to be coming out soon. I have a background in the paranormal dating back to my childhood. You know, I grew up in a haunted location. Things were happening when I was a young kid, like we'd come home and there'd be like crayon drawings on our ceiling, or stuffed animals would be moved around. Nothing malicious, just, you know, things would be moved. You know, you'd hear things, you'd see things out of the corner of your eye, and it always wondered what the heck was happening, you know. And when I was a little older, I went to go see a psychic in Lilydale with my friend, and she told me that there were 2 children spirits living in that house with us, and they were attached to something original in that home. And I left and went to college, and I ended up coming back and buying that house from my parents, and was really able to dive into the history because my son started experiencing some of the same things that I did, and it was like I was reliving it all over again, you know. And we ended up figuring out what they were attached to when we went up into the attic, because we had never gone up there. It was like one of those little squares in the ceiling. Had to get a ladder out, and then ended up finding these paintings up there of a little boy and a little girl that were just sitting against the back wall, all dusty. And it was like my first, you know, I always call it like my first Scooby-Doo episode of my life, you know, because it just took longer than a 30-minute TV show, you know, probably like 20 some years, you know, to figure that out. But I got really interested in it after that. I started doing a lot of touristy things, heading down my own path of the unknown, and going to Gettysburg and Salem and all these cool places, and just learning, you know, sucking it in. And then I ended up forming a team called the Greater Western New York Paranormal Society. We did a YouTube documentary series called Behind the Shadows. 4 seasons on there right now up on YouTube. And then, you know, got involved with doing local investigations. One of them being the Hinsdale house. I didn't own it. I was there as an investigator. And I ended up purchasing that location because it was going to hit the wrecking ball, saving it, fixing it up. And, you know, it is where it is today. It's internationally known. We get guests coming from all over the world. We've had it on numerous television shows, and more to come, you know, with that. It's quite the location. It's got like all the makings of a typical horror story, and a lot of truths and a lot of folklore attached to it. And it's probably one of the most interesting places I've ever been to. And I'm glad that we were able to save it as a paranormal community and use it for research now, because that's all it's used for. Nobody's going to live there. So
How much
I summed it all up really quick. I was like, damn, I just said my whole life story in 5 minutes. But I left a lot of stuff out.
So how much of a history of the paranormal does the house itself have? I mean, do we have, you know, a lot of reports going back so that we know at least when, you know, some of this activity was made public? Do we have dates?
We do. In 1969, you know, the property was purchased. It was 100 acres originally, and they were subplotted out into 10-acre plots. Ponds were dug on all the properties so they could cater to like hunters and stuff like that. Because it's out in the middle of nowhere in Hinsdale, New York. It's it's in the mountain, and this house is in the middle of, really nowhere. It's like, so, there's like the closest neighbor is like 400 yards away, so. In 1970, when the Dandy family moved in from Buffalo, they thought it would be their dream home, and they immediately started having things happen to them. Like, you could strike it off as a bunch of bad luck, but then they started getting physical activity, like where their daughter was getting hurt. Things were flying and poltergeist-like activity in the house. They were seeing things, creatures on the outside of the house that they couldn't explain, UFOs. It was a lot for the family to have to deal with. They consulted a priest from St. Bonaventure University, and now this was getting picked up by the Buffalo News, the Times, Orleans Herald. I mean, it was getting picked up. It was newsworthy because it was not something that you would normally hear. It was like actually before the movie The Exorcist came out, so this is all taboo. And of course, everything was deemed demonic back then. But they consulted this priest. The priest came there, did a mass. Things died down for a little bit. Then it came back full force. Then they brought in a famous psychic by the name of Alex Tanis. And the priest got the okay from the Vatican to perform a structural exorcism on the location. And then they said like the whole house shook. They were a film crew from New York was filming it. The house was cleared like within 20-30 seconds. And then it came back full force again, and they were forced to leave. The priest basically said, my best advice to you is to get out of here. And they hightailed it all the way to California. Laura later committed suicide. Mike later died in a car accident, and Clara, the mother who I'm in contact with, because it's her, this is her, what she's lived through, like part of my goal is to try to give her some closure, to try to give her some peace of mind. But she blames the house on that, like the house coming back to get her kids,
Now, just one
So you
thing
guys want to come spend the night?
one thing that I want to say, at least to the audience, is a lot of times people who haven't spent a lot of time on the East Coast, or people who aren't really familiar with New York State, tend to just think of New York as being New York.
Right.
Like, they don't realize how rural so many parts of upstate New York are. So this is a place you're saying that's fairly remote.
It's about 80-90 miles south of Buffalo. It takes about an hour and a half to get there. You actually could get to Bradford, Pennsylvania pretty quick. So yeah, it's a southern tier of western New York State.
So after the events involving that initial family, then where do we go with the history of the house?
So, we've gotten documented evidence from people that lived there for a month, people that lived there for a few weeks. One family left all of their personal items there because they didn't want what was there to know that they were leaving. Accounts of animals getting killed, lots of problems with cars. People would have cars issues. And, I always try to look at things logically, but we have had things where cars have just gone into ditches or didn't start. It's weird energy at that house,
What's the worst like physical harm it's done to a person?
I think it's more psychological than anything. Like there's been other exorcisms performed on people in that house after the Dandy family. But I think people become infatuated with the location. I think that it draws people in. And I think that you need to know where to set your boundaries when you're trying to deal with something like this. I've been focusing solely on bringing healing and positiveness to this location to try to combat the negative energy that's there. And it's been working so far. I mean, I feel like it has, I think the people that have gone to the house 4 years ago to investigate and have come this, like in the past year, can say that they feel a difference there. And that's not just me doing it. It's me bringing in priests, bringing in witches, bringing in shamans, bringing in all different types of lay people that practice healing, and having them do their thing at the house and on the property, because it's felt like it felt negative. There definitely was a darker energy there when I first bought it, and now it doesn't come out as much.
And you have very strict rules for the people that go to investigate at the home, as far as, you know, what they're allowed to do, what they're allowed to say, that kind of thing too. Don't
Yeah,
you?
I mean, a lot of what we do is respect. You know, we have to give respect to the just like like what we're doing right now, how we're talking. I would expect that the people that are there are going to respect the energies that are there. You know, so if you go in and you start acting like a jerk, you're going to get a jerky response and then say, "Oh, it's a demon." But if you can act positive, you're gonna see that you'll get some positive responses. And part of what I felt like me investigating this location, it felt to me like there was a lot of energies that wanted their voices to be heard, but nobody was tapping into that. So that's kind of what we're trying to bring out and trying to figure out the history and figuring out what's making that property tick, you know?
Now, we've got some interactivity with some of our chat rooms. People are popping in and out here. So we've got Rose who actually says that she goes twice a year, and it's different every time they go.
Yeah, she's actually been one of my biggest supporters of the location, you know, as far as helping out with renovation. She's from Michigan, and she comes on her birthday every year, and she comes usually in the summer, and then once in the winter, and likes to experience the location and kind of see how the energies are when she goes. And she's definitely been able to see a difference in all the years she's been coming. Even if it's just, you know, because when we bought the house, all the windows were boarded up, allowing light into the house again, you know, allowing the airflow to come through, just freshening it up, bringing plants in, you know, just bringing in a garden in the front yard. Things like that definitely help with bringing positive and joy to the location. So
You mentioned earlier that you had traced some of it back to some paintings in the attic.
that
What
was
were they?
that was my house.
Oh,
Where
that
I
was
grew
your
up.
house, not
Yeah.
this one. Oh, okay, okay. I got it mixed up. Well, there goes that question. That's not about this house, and that's what we're here to talk about. I was going to ask what there were paintings of, but
And maybe we can actually circle back to that in a little bit, because
Sure.
I am interested in that as well. When was the house actually built?
The house was built in 1853.
1853. Okay. Now we also have
Now-
another important question. Someone
Sure.
thinks that Mark looks high. That's just a random observation we're getting from the chat room here. That's actually from our YouTube chat room. So can we validate or can we refute this?
we can refute this because I don't touch any of the electric lettuce. I don't really drink that much anymore. It's completely refuted.
Okay, let's see if we can get a more interesting answer. If anyone wants to pop in chat and discuss whether or not they think Mark is imbibing on anything legal or illegal, please, by all means, we'll go ahead and we'll take a poll later on tonight.
The only thing I have here is my imitation vodka, which is just water. That's how exciting I am.
Apparently, your response was so boring that we've lost every single person in our chat room.
I think we have, yeah. Even your mom
job,
just
Mark.
left the chat. No, I'm kidding.
So remember, be fanciful in your response, Mark. We need something that's intervention worthy.
Okay, I've had 4 marijuanas and 13 cocaines.
Oh my God. So people are having different experiences.
What a mess.
And a lot of it is driven by, excuse me, how they're coming into the house, the attitude they have while they're there. What are we attributing to that? I mean, if people are experiencing something that they believe is again demonic, people are experiencing something that they believe is non-demonic. Have you or other researchers really do you think you know what it is, and is it something that seems different than what we would consider a typical haunting?
Yeah, I do. I think it's definitely something that's not human, but I also think it's an ancient spirit. I think it's something that's attributed to the land, and I think that the house is built on some type of sacred land. And many psychics, many have come there and have collaborated with that. you know, and it's not like they all get together and talk about it and come up with this idea. It's like it's the same thing over and over and over again, you know, from different people coming there at different times. So, I
So
mean, it's a possibility, you know. I mean, I don't know that we'll know for sure, but
so
always
we
die.
we know that multiple people have stayed in the house, multiple families. Was this a rental property, or were people actually purchasing the house and then that instant buyer's remorse?
Yes, exactly. So it was like a land lease, and it was people were attempting to purchase the house, and then it just kept defaulting back to the bank. So I mean, the bank that owned it ended up having when they started to sell it. I mean, it kept defaulting back to them. So I mean, they had it for like 80 years worth of mortgage payments.
Now,
Now, you mentioned that like every experience is kind of different in this. Is there any kind of correlation maybe to any seasons, to certain moods or experiences in the house? Like every summer you can expect maybe something like one thing to happen in the fall or anything like that, or even like the holidays.
No, no, I mean, but we have been documenting like where things happen, what people are experiencing. You know, since I've owned the house, we have a ledger kind of where people are filling in the experiences that they had, where on the property, what type of experience it was. And it's a lot of times that you do get some of the same energies, but then you get things that don't make any sense either, which tells me that there's probably more that needs to be figured out. You know, like we've just recently on the right side of the pond, we were clearing out all the dirt and resurfacing or regrading that, and we found an old foundation, that we can't date back to any maps to the 1700s. It looks like it's a foundation to an old building that we have no idea what it's there for, or who it belonged to, or anything at this point.
Hmm.
And it's cool that we found it because we almost plowed it down, and we just happened to see it, and we started digging it out, and it was like, wow, this is meticulous. The way that the stones were placed down, and it's a wall, and it looks really cool. It's like we're excavating ancient Egypt there, kind of in a way.
I've been investigating the paranormal myself for about 20 years. I'm also in Western New York, in the Rochester, New York area,
Uh-huh.
and been investigating for about 20 years. And one of the things that you said, I want to kind of dig into it a little bit, and it is, I find that we will get responses, or we will get certain responses based on the person that is there. Do you think that the Hinsdale house has that kind of a thing where, certain people bring that kind of energy, that they just get, that kind of a response from that, from the location? Do you think that's part of it?
It could be. I mean, that could be part of it. I mean, there's a lot of theories behind the way that people get responses. Sometimes people say that before they come, they have a dream about the location. Sometimes people, I, I don't know if you're familiar with who Greg and Dana Newkirk are. They came there a couple years ago with a team called Haunt Me, and they have a YouTube series out, and they did a really interesting job with the investigation that they did. They have like that haunted paranormal occult museum,
Yeah.
and they brought some of their items to the house to see how they reacted to the energies that were there. And they really focused on the house as an entity itself, which is interesting because, you notice, or I notice at least, people come there and they say the house did this. Like the house is a person. They talk about it like it's a being of some kind. And I'm just going to tell you this one little part, because if people are interested in seeing their investigation, definitely go on YouTube and find Haunt Me and check out the investigation they did there. But they were just doing a simple EVP recording in the living room, and they said, we don't want to talk to any energies, any spirits. We only want to talk to the house. And they said, what do you want from us? And on the recording, when they played it back, it said energy. So is the house is the house an energy in itself? Is the house just giving people what they want to make them more interested in it, so that they come back and it can feed off them? I mean, it's like, my God, I just sat back and I'm like, that's really deep. That's really, really a deep thought process there to think about something like that. But I mean, we're getting solid classifications of spirits that are at some point part of the history of this house, though, as well. So we're able to like document names that we're getting. We're able to document EVPs and voices, things like that. It's really cool. But I don't, definitely I make sure that when people come there, I get to talk to them before they book, because I don't want to have people there that don't have experience investigating without having somebody there that does, just because of the approach they may take because of watching it on TV or something, because it's definitely, TV and what you do in real life are two different things. So.
Now, we've talked about your experiences now with the house, Dan. What was your journey like in the beginning to bring you to Hinsdale House? So how were you sort of introduced to the house? And after that introduction, what were some of the first things that you did in regards to the Hinsdale House?
Well, it's crazy because normally for my team, I was the one that booked the locations and got the history and presented that to the team. And for this particular location, Cameron, the co-founder of the group, he's like, I got this one covered. I just need you guys to show up. Here's the address. Don't do any research on it. I'll brief everybody when you get here. And it was in the middle of winter, and here I am with a 2 front-wheel drive car going in the mountains, the Allegheny Mountains, and trying to get up this giant hill. And finally made it there. And I'm like, I don't know how the hell I'm going to get out of here. And it felt so desolate, no internet service, no way to communicate with the outside world where this house was. And here I am going in there, and I go sit down in the living room. Only energy, the only electricity they had was in the living room at that time. And we sat down in the living room, and he played the episode of A Haunting called A Dark Forest. And it was based on the story of the house back in the 1970s. And I just remember watching that, and then I looked at him and I said, are we in that house? Is that what we just watched? Yeah. And I go, are you effing kidding me right now? I go, I would have mentally needed to prepare myself probably for a while to know that I was going to be going into a house with a failed exorcism. And here I was sitting in there, just with my guard down. And I was a little upset, but that night, the thing that really stood out after I got over it and we started investigating, the things that really stood out were the fact that every piece of equipment that we had was going off. We were getting EVPs. It's like whatever energy was there was trying to like tell us something. And it just, that interested me so much because, as like going on an investigation, you could probably sit in a room for 4 hours and you'll be happy if you get one EVP. Well, here you are at a house and all your equipment's going off and you're getting EVPs and you're there for 3 or 4 hours and boom, you're getting all this stuff. And it was just interesting to me to be able to see that much activity in one small location. And it got me going back. And then to the point where they were going to tear it down, I started doing more research on it and found out about a family that lived there in the 80s. And then I had felt like I connected with them, and that really pushed me to buy it. Because I felt like, okay, now we have these energies, we have these spirits here now, and they need to have a voice, and we can't just have this place torn down. This is history. I mean, the house has legit legit things that have happened there that are documented in the news. Like with this little boy that died in 1947, Alfred Warren Emerson, from the buzzsaw behind the barn. There's a brother that killed his brother on the hill right behind the house, that when they were arguing about religion. So, I mean, there's a lot of energies. There was a hanging tree on the northeast corner of the property that the town of Hinsdale used for killing people. There could be so many wandering things happening, with that.
That was actually my next question, is if you had gone far enough back to find the history of what had happened that would cause any hauntings. It sounds like some pretty colorful history there.
Yeah, and there's Native American burial grounds on the property right next door too. We've captured pictures of creatures that we don't know what they are. The only explanation I've had to this day is that it's a pukwudgie, which are, they protect Indian burial grounds. We've had pictures of like these different lights in the forest, and teams have said that they're elemental energies that are there. I've looked into ley lines. I've looked into the power. We had a diver, a forensic diver, dive into the pond, and he said there's an aquifer that's pumping upward towards the house, pumping upward. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So something that has always interested me when we have locations like this that obviously have a ton of spiritual or otherwise, some kind of energy there. Do you think there's any correlation into what people are bringing into it, i.e., like thought forms?
Yeah, and I think that if you use if you do it enough, you can definitely change things. You can change where the energies are. You can change. The power of the mind is really untapped, and I think if a lot of people focus on the same thing, you can change things. And just like with collective consciousness, like we've done experiments up there using collective consciousness with groups and stuff, and it's amazing some of the results that we've gotten. Just having people think of a word and then putting a recorder down and playing the recorder back and having a word pop up on a recorder that you were thinking. I mean, it's amazing, and it's happened 2 out of 5 times that I've tried it so far at the house.
Now, have you tried
So,
experiments that are more on the thought form side? Like, have you focused on something to see if something would manifest that maybe had nothing to do with the history, or just something that collectively you were thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, we've done everything from the basics to the high tech. I mean, anything that you can think of. If there's a new piece of equipment that somebody invents, I usually try to get it to try it there, or a team. There's a lot of paranormal investigators locally that will come and utilize the house to just try new equipment to see if it will come in handy or it'll work.
And how far are you currently from the house?
Well, I'm in the Buffalo, New York region, so I'm about an hour and a half, hour and 15 minutes away from the location.
No,
And
if you're living like near, like,
no, but I have a team, so I have a good group of people. I've been friends with my neighbors that are down the road. And, like if I needed something, he'd be there for me in a heartbeat. I have 2 neighbors that actually live on the same road that the house is connected to. And I have somebody in Cuba. I have a couple of people in Bradford. And it's not, I have a good team of folks that help out there. And and I do it like that too because I don't want to like overwhelm people.
right.
I don't want to go there all the time. I don't want it to be something that's what I focus my whole life on. I think that's a lot of the problems of the past is it was like one person, taking care of all the duties, and this way people can just go help maybe once every couple of weeks or something like that, and letting teams in and whatnot. So it's not just overwhelming people.
Do you feel that the house has a reach? I mean, are people going to the location and then continuing to experience things after they've left the location?
There's been a couple instances where that's happened. One notably, Paranormal Lockdown, when Nick went there, when I first purchased the house, that's how I met him. And he had something follow him home, and he had to have it cleansed out of his house. It was a really weird night, and I had no idea. He had not told me that he was having things happen to him at his house. And the night that he had his house cleansed is the night that I was doing a tour at the house, and I had one of my portals going, and on it all of a sudden it just started saying, "Where's Nick? Where's Nick?" It started calling for him, and I recorded it, and I called him up, and I had him watch it, and he's like, and he told me the story about how that night that he just had his house cleansed and something had followed him home. It was kind of weird. I mean, that hasn't been the norm. Like I've only had a couple people say that, but I mean, you have to go in understanding what you may be dealing with, and you have to protect yourself the way that you feel that you need to protect yourself. Don't go in naive and think that can't happen anywhere, though. I mean, that's any location you go into, not just the Hinsdale house. You gotta be on your toes when you're doing this type of stuff.
A lot of people believe that houses themselves are a living, breathing entity. You talk to construction workers, you talk to people that do windows, doors, insulation, that kind of thing. They'll tell you that, a house lives and breathes, that it's all part of, the natural cycle of things. And you've said a couple times that you think, like people speak to the house itself. Is just as a weird question that I have to throw out there. Do you know where the lumber was milled from? Is it like local lumber? Was there a mill in the area that they used? Is it something that was trucked in from Buffalo or trucked up from, down in,
Well,
where,
you can,
the southern tier
I
for the
believe
down?
it was in Hinsdale, there before it was burned down. Interesting story. There's folklore about two brothers that lived in the house that lured in people from a stagecoach, and they would kill and murder them, steal their goods, store their bodies in the basement in the crawl space, and then after the winter thaw, they would bury their bodies out in the hill. And obviously that's folklore, and I want to make sure that that when I first bought the house, people were calling that out like it was the truth of the matter, and there was like proof of this, and I go, there's no proof, that it's till there's proof, it's folklore, and there's no way to provide any documentation of these two brothers that lived there, killing people. So but so the bathroom, right? So the bathroom had to get remodeled, and there's this gentleman out of Columbus, Ohio. His name's Jeff Fenton, similar to what you're saying about like how the house speaks and how the house might have energy. Jeff kind of has a similar thought process, and I believe like it's a good idea. Like he salvages wood from like houses that have burned down or haunted locations, and he actually devises spirit box cases and turns them into spirits boxes, in hopes that maybe the energy from the wood will come out when doing a spirit box session, which is really, really a cool thought process. It's like using a trigger object, but you made it into a spirit box. So there's this chunk of wood that was in pretty decent shape from the basement. That was a foundation block, like one of those big milled chunks of wood. And we had to get the Amish to make us some new ones, because part of it you could just stick your finger through because the toilet was leaking for so long. And we had to like redo all of that. So the part that was still good, I sent to him. And then about 2 weeks later, he goes, Dan, you're not going to believe this. He goes, when I cut into the wood, and he goes, let me just send you the picture. And he sends me the picture, and there's a bullet lodged in the wood. I'm like, you got to effing be kidding me right now. That just freaks you out, but then he sends me the wood, and I show it to a couple experts, and they say it's pre-Revolutionary War, the bullets, which means that the bullet was shot, hit a tree, that tree was harvested, cut down, and then used to build the Hinsdale house. So it doesn't mean that somebody was shot in the basement, but the things start running through your mind when you first find things out. Then you have to like calm down and really look at things logically to try to figure out what the truth is behind it. Just like we found when we were redoing the bathroom, we found these carved bullheads. One was in the wall, one was in the floorboards. And I started thinking, this has got to be some voodoo shit. Like this is pretty crazy. And then Cassidy Nichols, who was a local historian, researcher down in Hinsdale, she was determined to figure out what those were, and she ended up figuring out that they were Boy Scout like neckerchief slides. Like that you would put your neckerchief that had a hole in them, and I was like, holy cow! And she showed me a picture of them, and within the history of the house, one of the McMahon, the father, he was actually a Boy Scout leader in the 1950s, and that's about the era that these were from. I just don't know how did they end up in the floorboards and in the wall? Like how did that happen? We also found a letter from Mary Dandy in the wall too, written to one of her friends in Buffalo. Like how does this stuff end up in the wall of the bathroom?
They were actually buffalo heads, and it was right during that 4 losing Super Bowl seasons, and somebody just went, screw this.
Do you think he may have like killed Boy Scouts and kept the?
No, I believe that. I think that his sons
don't even go down that road.
I believe his sons probably carved them, and somehow they fell through a floor. But I don't know how they got into the wall and shit. I mean, all the wood seems pretty legit, unless, well, I don't know. I don't even know that. I don't know. I just don't know how they got in there.
Could have been remodeling at any point in time. Could have
been. I mean, definitely could have been.
It's not always the most nefarious, it's usually Occam's razor likes to come into play. The easiest answer's probably the right one.
Yeah,
a lot of empty boxes of cookies, though.
Or like a wood knot in the wood that got pushed through or something, and then they
just something
fell through, maybe.
I got a question that's sort of twofold for you, Dan. And first of all, the question that I want to ask is what is sort of the weirdest experience you've personally had there? And then second of all, I would like to know what's the weirdest experience you've heard of that's happened there?
I mean, man, just thinking about all the different things that people have experienced there. I always fall back on when I first started researching Flomiznik, but most recently, I was doing a tour with a rookie, kind of a greenhorn. She had never investigated before, and she wanted to spend the night, and she wanted to try to experience something paranormal. We sat there all night. I sat in the kitchen. We talked about the stories of the house. We used different equipment. It was quiet. Nothing was happening, and it got to the point where, I'm like, well, you can't make this stuff happen, and this is, it is what it is. Now I've investigated for a long time, and I think up to this point I had maybe felt something like physical once. It was like probably 3:30 in the morning, and we both agreed, okay, let's probably try to get a little bit of sleep before we have to get up and go. Turned all the lights off, had a night light on in the living room, and turned over on the big couch. She took the small couch, and then I felt something just caress like the back of my head. And I was like, what is that? I was like, come on, and I felt it. It felt like something just brushed the back of my head. And I slowly turned around, and I could see a black mass moving in front of this light, and it was blocking out the light. And I was like, it's one of those, like, take a deep breath. I'm like, oh my God, like this is freaking me out right now. But I wasn't like scared. Like I was, you see it with your own eyes. It had happened before, and it freaked me the shit out, but it was a little bit more calming to me. Like I felt like it was like maybe somebody just like checking on me, maybe, like just seeing how I was, and it didn't feel like negative to me. And I like kicked Kaylee.
I refer to those as paranormal investigator scared. Our level of scared is completely different from someone else's level of scared.
Well, yeah, and it takes time. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Like the first time I ever saw something with my own eyes, I ran out of the freaking building like a baby. Like I was scared to death. And then you evolve. Now I would probably walk towards it and say, "Hi, my name's Dan. What's your?" Like it's different as you become more in tune with your surroundings and what it could possibly be. Haley turned around and she looked at it, and she was like, "Oh my God, do you see that?" And I'm like, okay, that confirms it's there. And then she jumped over on the couch, and she was freaked out, and it just kept going back and forth, blocking the light out. And after 5 minutes, it just dissipated into where one of the bedrooms would have been at the house. And it was like really cool experience for me to be able to experience that. Now this shadow that we have like live cameras in the house that record, so like when a team goes in, instead of them having to bring static cameras, we have like 5 cameras strategically placed around the house. And when they leave, they can retrieve the camera footage, all 50, 60 hours of it. And we've captured them. We've captured poltergeist activity on those cameras. We've captured tons of EVPs, and the shadow figure coming from the kitchen into the living room. And and that happened that night when I was there. It was so cool.
Now, does the surrounding area also have properties that have experienced activity? So I'm wondering, is it just Hinsdale House, or does the surrounding area also experience activity, Dan?
No, there's been neighbors that I've interviewed that have experienced things as well. And they call it the Enchanted Mountains. There's been a lot of death associated with the town of Hinsdale. And I look at where the house sits, and I think about, if you were a Native American tribe back in the day, where would you settle? Where, this has got a water source, you're up high, and to me, that would be the no-brainer of where I would want to settle, So
You're in Western New York where you get 4 feet of snow at any given time. Like you
yeah,
snap your fingers and four.
especially in the southern tier too. I mean, that's even worse because they get a lot of lake effect there.
Yeah.
So we talked about your weirdest experience. As far as the weirdest you've heard, who did it come
Well, I
from and
mean,
what was it?
there was a couple investigators there that were down in the basement, Chelsea, Mike, and Brian, and they were in the basement and they had a chair. It levitated and flew at them down in the basement. Documented it on camera. I was like, it was the weirdest thing to be able to see. Like they are both trained in the Catholic religion. You know, as far as investigating, they worked under the Archbishop in New York City, and they also did a show called The Demon Files. It was on Destination America, and just for them to be down there and experience a poltergeist like that is very unique to see it with your own eyes. It's cool, like when we get it on camera, and you can see something like move, or we have like trigger objects around the house, but to actually experience something like that with your own eyes, it's pretty free. You know, I don't know how I would react. You know, it's having something thrown towards you, like a chair.
Now, the more that we have as far as the television programs, YouTube programs, I mean, we are inundated with media right now. Now, let's go back to the 70s and 80s when people were scrambling for physical evidence. We didn't have nearly the amount of photographs. We didn't have hardly any video evidence. Now, and that was really always what we were looking for. It was the burden of proof. The 70s, 80s, even early 90s, it was still that burden of proof. Now it seems we have literally so much material that the burden of proof has shifted, but yet it seems as though we're still at that point where people can't admit that something is happening. Well, what are your personal thoughts on that? Because in my opinion, the evidence now is overwhelming. I don't see how anybody can look at everything we have and say, this is all bullshit. We have such a ton of evidence from all kinds of different forms of media. How can anyone look at all of them? Because it only takes one of them to be true. Just one
Yeah,
piece
I
of
mean,
evidence.
because you're dealing with the unknown, things that could be staged, things that could be altered. You know, it's so easy to alter a digital photograph. It's so easy to fake an EVP. And for me to go and provide this type of evidence to you, just say I'm presenting it to you, you could have a doubt. And if there's any doubt whatsoever in that person's mind, they have a right to believe the way that they think. You know, that's why, you know, everybody's shooting to try to do things more scientifically. So there's nobody used to collect data. Nobody used to look at the temperature. Nobody used to, and now as researchers, we are diving in deeper to be able to look at all these things and say, hey, you know, like why would the barometric pressure change all of a sudden when we got a picture of a spirit at the same time on a DVD recorder, or what, you know, like that. You have to look at all the changes that are happening around you and try to collaborate that in order to provide that as any type of evidence, you know. So looking at it more scientifically, yeah, it's getting more people to turn their heads, but you're still going to always have doubters, you know, because you're dealing with the unknown. And until somebody can say, I can prove to you that there's a ghost, there's still going to be those people that are buried in their religion, their religious beliefs, and that is what it is, you know. You'll have protesters at the corner.
I had this argument last night. We do several presentations during this time of the year, and I had the argument last night with a scientist. He came to one of our presentations as part of a group, and he was just being stubborn the whole night. And I finally looked at him and I said, "Sir, do you know what a quark is?" And yeah, what is a quark, sir? Well, I actually, has anyone ever seen a quark, sir? No. And I go, how many dimensions of math does it take to prove the existence of the quark? And he readily admitted it took 5 dimensions worth of math. I said, so you are allowing yourself 5 dimensions in math to prove something that you've never ever seen exists. but I'm not allowed those extra dimensions. I'm not allowed those, those little turns. The scientific community just does not want to. It drives me crazy. It makes me
Well,
nuts
it's
because I can
changing.
go in, right, but it's still people are more willing to believe that you saw a UFO than they are to believe that you saw a
True.
ghost.
Yeah.
Well, and
And
here's
I-
something that sort of not to be interrupted here, guys. Something that always sort of cooks my noodle is that I've been working in media, in graphic design. I've been working in film production for over 20 years now. So I'm able to take a look at a piece of footage. I'm able to take a look at a still photo. I'm able to take a look at a lot of supposed evidence. And I can usually tell pretty quickly, first of all, if it's a bad fake. I can tell over an extended amount of time if it's a good fake. Now, here is where I get a little argumentative with people is that in being in the industry as long as I have, if there were that many good hoaxers out there, I'd be out of work. It takes far more skill, far more time, and far more diligence to hoax these things. To me, it's just a matter of logistics. Do we have a million hoaxers capable of doing this kind of a design and photo manipulation and video manipulation, or do we have evidence? And I think from a logistical perspective, we have more evidence. And that's just coming from me. That's just my 2 cents.
But my additional 2 cents to your 2 cents would be like, for investigators, know the equipment, know that the equipment that they're working with,
Yeah.
because there are ways to get like flares, so different types of things on a camera. If they're using cell phones, if they're using flashes, that data is never presented to somebody when a picture is presented as possible evidence of the paranormal.
Right.
And it's very important to know what type of camera you're using. Do you know how to use it properly? What type of shutter speed we're using? What type of all the different things that could potentially debunk the photo. So and that's just for photos. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many. I employ anybody that's doing it to try to sit down and look at a piece of equipment and explain how it works before they're using it, and then
I
agree.
I think the more educated the person is behind the camera, the better that they're going to be able to explain why this might be genuine, as opposed to coming into a conversation where they don't have that data.
Unless they're coming into the conversation looking for an explanation, that's fine. Like, this is what I use. This is the shutter speed. This is the type of picture I was getting, and is there any explanation as a professional that you can give me that this would be here? Then that's cool. Like they're looking for that. But
yeah.
Don't present.
I am a huge fan of like keeping investigations old school, simple technology.
Yeah.
A simple digital. You don't need a $600 digital recorder.
No.
A $29.99 digital recorder is going to capture the same EVP that a $600 one is going to capture. And I see so many people that, I mean, I've been investigating for 20 years. I've had a group of my own for 19. I've seen so many people come in and out of groups because they expect something, and they expect TV, and then they get reality.
Yeah.
But they come in, like with $1,000 in a briefcase. You don't need $1,000 in a briefcase. You need $29.99 and yourself. That's all you need.
Yeah.
You'll do a much better investigation, and you'll actually, get the same evidence.
As always, guys, I think your mic is muted, Mark.
Oh man,
God,
I had a good line too. I was saying, Rob keeps it so old school that he's still got an 8-track in his car.
I do.
I've seen the guy bring an abacus to investigations.
I just chisel what the ghost says in stone. I bring a tablet. I have a
read
hammer.
More evidence that Rob has presented in cuneiform than anything else, and I got it. And I got.
All right,
I'm
old.
You're keeping it real.
We get it.
Keeping it real Sumerian. One thing that I always have to add at this point in the night is this is indeed the fastest night on the internet. We have already blown through our hour. I would like to know, Daniel, as far as people finding out more about Hinsdale House, are there any URLs? How can they get online, find out more about it? Is it being featured in any specials coming up? What's being planned over, obviously, this time of year, which is the season we would probably expect some news on Hinsdale House? What can you give us in the next few minutes about where people can learn more?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way is to go to my website, danielklaes.com. I have links for the Hinsdale House, also represent the Wildwood Sanitarium in Salamanca, New York. Any events that I'm going to be going to. So everything's centrally located on that page. Just click on the perspective link that you're interested in. As far as events go, I try to spread out events throughout the year. I do bring in like investigators from TV shows sometimes throughout the year that come and do special events with the public. I also do tours throughout the year. We have 4 tours planned for the month of October. A lot of them are almost sold out. So if you're interested in coming and checking the place out and doing a tour, definitely get up there and get a ticket for that. But as far as that goes, like anything that you want to find out about the house, just go to danielklaes.com and you can check it out from there.
Do you have a few,
And
few
can you
moments?
spell that out for us?
Yeah, it's DANIELKLAES at danielklaes.com.
And do you have a few moments off the air for us, Dan?
Yeah, sure.
We can't thank you enough for coming on with us tonight. We had a fascinating hour. Again, a very quick hour, which seems to happen every Thursday. We would love to have you back. Again, I think it's also fantastic that you were able to save this house from demolition, which obviously is a huge service, not just the paranormal community, but historically, I think that's significant as well. So, kudos goes out to you. Anybody who is in the Louisville, Kentucky area, remember, we will be representing Night Terrors Radio at the Fright Night Horror Weekend and Film Festival. Please check that out. We will be there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So if you're in the Louisville area, please come by. Our film will be showing 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Saturday in Room B. That is Holes in the Sky, the Sean Miller story. Thank you so much, Dan. Everybody else who is coming in and out of the chat rooms tonight, we've had such a great response to the show. Thanks, everybody. Have yourself a fantastic